This video will be dedicated to my oldest cat, Molly, who we adopted in 2009 and at the time of this recording, died over a week ago. During her lifetime, she was able to outlast several pets, and now I hope she's joined them up there in animal heaven. May she rest in peace. Hey everyone, Physical Media 3 here, and today I'm reviewing the next Sonic game in the classic timeline, Sonic the Hedgehog CD. Following the release of the first Sonic game, many developers left Sega of Japan due to pay disputes. While most of them would end up moving to the West, the main one who stayed in the East was co-creator Naoto Oshima, who began work on a follow-up to the first Sonic game around the time those who left for the Land of the Free did as well, which means that two sequels were being made at the same time. No wonder it was so confusing where these two games belonged in the timeline for so long. However, while what would become Sonic the Hedgehog 2 would be made for the Genesis, Japan's sequel would be named Sonic the Hedgehog CD, after Sega's hot new add-on for the Mega Drive, the Mega CD, renamed the Sega CD in the home of the brave, that ended up not being so hot. The add-on ended up being a major flop for Sega as a result of its mixed reception, relative lack of interesting games that weren't just enhanced versions of existing Genesis games, and the need to have a Genesis to even play the CD attachment. It would be the first of many missteps that eventually led to their downfall. Despite this, Sonic CD, as commonly abbreviated, would end up being the best-selling game for the console at over 1 million copies sold, which was still pretty paltry in comparison to the first game. Now, obviously I don't own a Sega CD or even a Genesis, and unlike the other Sonic games, which have been ported to a lot of consoles, Sonic CD was a lot less frequent. The first port was to PC in 1996, which would later be used for the underwhelming Sonic Gems collection on the GameCube, which was how I first played the game, and then Christian Whitehead would be commissioned to remaster the game for HD 7th Gen consoles and mobile devices as a way to promote Metal Sonic's appearance in Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 2. Could have also remastered Knuckles Chaotix in that case, which would eventually be used and butchered somewhat for the Sonic Origins collection in 2022, I'll get to that later. Because of the relative underground status of this game, fans have treated it like a hidden gem, which sort of covered up common thoughts on the actual quality, which was slowly eroded as the game became more widely available. Nowadays, it's more debated on the quality of the game, and I'm here to add my own thoughts. Canonically speaking, according to Origins anyway, following Sonic's defeat of Eggman in the first game, Sonic runs off on another adventure. Meanwhile, a little pink hedgehog named Amy Rose is reading some tarot cards that tell her of a destined encounter with a knight in shining armor. Just then, Little Planet appears over Neverlake, as it does once every year, known to hold the fabled Time Stones. Hearing of this, Eggman seizes this moment and begins terraforming the planet. Sometime later, Sonic arrives at Neverlake and sees the planet chained to the surface. Recognizing Eggman's face on one of the mountains, Sonic immediately runs up one of the chains to the planet and, along the way, sees not only holograms of a robotic-looking doppelganger of him, but also encounters Amy, who instantly falls in love with Sonic. Eventually, Amy gets kidnapped by the robotic doppelganger revealed to be Metal Sonic, and now, Sonic has to save her while collecting the Time Stones to ensure a good future for Little Planet. The story here is a lot more involved than the first game, and I think it's pretty interesting that they're somewhat subverting the damsel in distress trope by having Sonic not fall in love with Amy, in line with his free spirit. Apart from that though, in the game itself, I feel Amy isn't really expanded upon that much. Most of the interesting aspects of her come from the manual, which, fun fact, renamed her as Princess Sally to tie in with the Sad AM cartoon, despite not even bothering to change her sprite to something more familiar. Like what, did they think kids weren't gonna notice? They noticed when Henry had weird buffers in the Railway series, for crying out loud. Anyways, Amy as a character would simply remain spin-off fodder for a while before essentially becoming a main character once the franchise became fully 3D, where she would be taken in various directions, some better than others I'd say. I'll get to that later. I'd say Metal Sonic is a more interesting character, and of the 16-bit games, is the most interesting robotic copy of Sonic, due to him actually being able to match Sonic's speed, unlike the other characters. Helping to make the story more interesting is the presence of animated cutscenes for this game. No, I'm not talking about the cutscenes Origins ads. I'm talking about the cutscenes made for the original Sega CD version, which looked terrible. This is a common issue with the Sega CD where the FMVs tended to look like shit. Luckily, either Toei and or Studio Junior kept the original masters and remastered them to run smoother on the PC port and take up the full screen on the Sonic Gems collection. I really like these remastered cutscenes with their charming early to mid-90s animation and being a nice showcase of Sonic's personality. It's little wonder why later animations look like they took inspiration from the art style in these cutscenes. The ending cutscenes are pretty poorly done on the Origins release, however. I'll get to that later. Complementing the presentation in these cutscenes is a gorgeous looking game. The Sega CD was capable of enhancing the graphics of the Genesis, and Sonic Team took advantage of it, especially the special stages with some of the best backgrounds ever, for the most part, to give us some truly unique feeling zones, despite most of them being modeled after Sonic 1. While Sonic and Eggman's sprites are mostly reused from Sonic 1, they are given new animations to help them stick out, mostly Eggman hot-footing it in Quartz Quadrant, and Sonic jumping off the stage if you wait too long, saying, "I'm out of here!" which is cut out of the Origins collection. No! Possibly to make it more in line with the later games which canonically have Sonic Mew, which I personally don't agree with. The only reason they didn't talk was because of hardware limitations, not because they were canonically Mew. Sonic games are also faded out. The soundtracks for this game are excellent. The American soundtrack has some very moody and atmospheric tracks, and I feel like some of them actually fit the levels better than their Japanese counterparts. On the other hand, I do think the Japanese tracks are more consistent, especially with the Paz Zone music remaining the same in both versions, and there are more tracks as well. The final boss actually gets its own track instead of just being the regular boss music, and even a unique ending song rather than just a remix of the opening song. The songs in this game are iconic. Sonic Boom is a pretty decent track, though I definitely prefer Crush 40 and Cash Cash's cover, while You Can Do Anything is just a joy to listen to. I feel like the ending remix of Sonic Boom is a little bland in comparison to Cosmic Eternity, which is just beautiful. It's also here where the Origins collection screws it up. You see, before the song starts in the cutscene, there's some audio of the base blowing up, them landing back on Mobius, and the chain being destroyed before the music starts, signifying that Little Planet is free. Which was cut out of the American soundtrack. In the Origins version, the music starts right away. If that wasn't bad enough, the post-credits cutscenes are fucked up too. They both have some nice visuals and some lovely music, especially in the case of the good ending. Which is completely silent in the Origins version. Apart from those screw-ups, for the most part the game looks better, thanks to the widescreen treatment and improved frame rate, which comes especially handy when it comes to special stages. I'll get to that later. Speaking of stages, the gameplay in the original feels a little stiff in comparison to Sonic 1, at least in the animation department. Not helping is that the collision detection in the original was not the greatest. The 2011 remaster certainly makes things run smoother, but it still doesn't feel as smooth as the other Genesis games. This is most apparent with the spin dash, which feels like a prototype of what was introduced in Sonic 2. I'll get to that later, where you need to hold down the jump button while crouching, another problem I'll get to later. Otherwise, Sonic just stands there, not doing anything. Sadly, this problem wasn't fixed in either the PC port or the Sonic Gems collection, and it took until the 2011 remaster to finally give players an option for the CD spin dash, or what was in Sonic 2. In addition, we also have the Super Peel Out, where holding up on the D-pad while tapping the jump button more quickly can cause Sonic to enter a figure 8 formation and go much faster than before. It's pretty cool to look at, but I honestly wouldn't recommend using this move since not only are you not invulnerable while using the move, It's also not ideal to use for most of the level design, where it's very easy to bump into stage hazards, especially when you're trying to explore the levels for roboticizers. I'll get to that later. It also highlights a problem I have with the Genesis Sonic games in general. I get Sega wanting to make sure their flagship franchise is compatible with the standard 3-button controller, as not everyone would have had the 6-button controller at the time. However, I think they went too far in simplifying the controller layout, something that seems to be very common in Sonic games really, and using just one button for everything in conjunction with the D-pad. In this game's case, you could have had jump on A, spin dash on B, and peel out on C, with no need for the use of the D-pad at all outside of moving Sonic. Would have been a better showcase of Sonic's speed if you ask me, in addition to remaining optional, and if people didn't like the controller layout, they could include a menu with an option to customize the controller layouts, or at the very least, different styles, since that was what other games around the time were doing. Anyway, apart from those flaws, the game is pretty fun to play overall, with some improvements over Sonic 1, such as the camera shifting left and right depending on where Sonic is to get a better view of what's up ahead. There's a save feature in the original Sega CD version that saves by zone, updated to save by act in the 2011 remaster, and keeps track of the time stones and or roboticizers the player collected. I'll get to that later. Never mind. I'll get to that right now. One thing Sonic CD has above every other classic Sonic game is that it has multiple ways of getting the good ending. You can do it like Sonic 1 and get the time stones, or do it like Sonic 2 and explore the levels for specific items. With the time stone method, just like Sonic 1, you need 50 rings and you need to jump to the giant rings at the end of the level, which means a lot of the same flaws are present. Seriously, they couldn't just let Sonic have more time until the victory screen faced black to jump into the ring? Could have fixed that, Christian. Thankfully, holding onto your rings feels easier to do with a relatively slow speed and better camera, not to mention the 2011 remaster's widescreen view, making it easier to see things ahead of you. Once you jump in, you're taken to a 3D stage similar to Sonic 2, where you run around on rails in a trippy place. To get a time stone, you need to jump into the UFOs floating around. Every time you destroy a UFO, complete with a satisfying sounding explosion, you get a prize within, like the boxes, from rings to speed shoes. Make sure not to touch the water all over the place or the timer goes down. If/when you have only 20 seconds left, a special blue UFO appears, and if you smash that, you get 30 seconds added back to your time. While the stage design is a pretty cool concept and has some amazing looking backgrounds, the design is mainly held back by technical limitations, the choppy frame rate and awful collision detection, both of which are thankfully fixed in the remaster, making them a lot more fun as a result. The UFO coloration on what has what can also be confusing unless you pay attention to the strip colors, or play the 2011 remaster where the Speed Shoes UFO has a similar blue color to the time replenishing UFO, which would have made it more confusing had it not been for the sound effect that it makes when it appears. If you don't like the special stages, however, you can do it the second method, which is exploring for the roboticizers. You'll notice them in the present, alongside some items present where they shouldn't be, but they seem rusty and abandoned. So how do you destroy them?
Time travel!
To do this, you first need to find a signpost that says future or past, and then you need to keep running at a consistent speed to activate some sort of spark inspired by Back to the Future, and eventually pull off some serious shit and warp through a magical portal of some sort to end up in your desired timeline. There are 4 planes of the same level: the past, the present, the bad future, and the good future. The past is Little Planet when Eggman just arrived and is starting to plant his plans on the planet. The present is when Sonic arrives, and while the planet is still relatively unharmed, there are a lot of enemies to destroy and turn into plants. Weird. The bad future is where Eggman ends up succeeding, and Little Planet is turned into an absolute polluted hellhole. A nice subtle way of showing Sonic what will happen if he fails. The good future is one where Eggman fails and Little Planet has never looked more beautiful than before. A nice little reward for the effort you made in finding the roboticizer. However, maintaining a consistent speed can be quite challenging, especially in the original version with its more limited space, making it harder to spot enemies approaching. Not to mention, no matter what version you play, most of the level design doesn't feel optimized for keeping a consistent speed, which is probably why there are dedicated sections where you can keep a consistent speed. The 2022 version mitigates this somewhat with the drop dash move, making it easier to maintain speed in place and travel to your desired point in time. Not to mention, trying to get some of these machines can be really cryptic. Most of the time, it's pretty easy, other times it's pretty difficult. While it can be fun, it can be a bit frustrating at times. Thankfully, both ways of getting a good ending are optional, and you can just speed through the levels if you want, though they were clearly not meant to be sped through because they can be pretty short and rather bland. just like some of the level theme rehashes with alliterative names. Palm Tree Panic is basically Green Hill Zone with palm trees, complete with all of its effectiveness in getting players started with the game, and it being a fun zone to play through along with a nice 3D slope that's only in this zone. Collision Chaos earns its name because of how much bouncing around there is. If you're just traversing through the level normally, it can be a fun challenge. If you're looking for the roboticizer, it can get pretty annoying. Tidal Tempest, despite being rehashed of Labyrinth Zone, is a huge improvement as there are fewer moments of slow tedium, especially with the tubes that you can hold in the direction they're going to go slightly faster, and there are ways to mitigate the slowness somewhat. Quartz Quadrant feels the blandest of the zones, with the only real gimmick being the rotatable conveyor belt. It is relatively easy to navigate through though. Wacky Workbench is horrible. Fuck this zone. The constantly bouncing floors can make it a pain to travel through, especially if you're looking for the zone's roboticizer. Stardust Speedway is a huge improvement, where traveling through it can be quite the spectacle, especially if you're just speeding through it. It's also here where you encounter Metal Sonic, and his fight is rather unique amongst the series. The boss fights in general are pretty unique, as rather than hitting Eggman enough times, though that is still emphasized a bit here, Sonic is mainly trying to outlast Eggman long enough. While the first boss is pretty easy if you just get behind him, not to mention being Pink in the good future, and the second boss is pretty awkward to traverse through, the rest are pretty fun, and do a good job in testing the player's skills they've acquired throughout the zone, as they use that particular zone's gimmicks. In the case of Metal Sonic, you race him to the finish line while avoiding traps in Eggman's Death Laser, a nice use of Sonic's speed in a boss fight. Though I will say that Metal Sonic feels pretty weak since it's implied that he dies just by crashing headfirst into a suddenly closing wall. I don't know, I feel like it'd make more sense if Eggman's Death Laser was what killed him. I feel like Metal Sonic being more powerful in Sonic Generations makes it an improvement. I'll get to that later.
Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
Metallic Madness is certainly a final level. It can be quite amazing to travel through, and frankly it can get quite frustrating. But the mini Sonic in Act 2 is pretty cute.
Just like the picture you can unlock in the original version, though the other images are quite weird.
Apart from that though, the section he's in can be quite maddening. The final boss has a pretty bullshit start at the end as well. After traversing through a rather frustrating bottomless pit section, you come across Eggman's final contraption, just surrounded by protective blocks that keep circling him, making it practically impossible to hit him unless you take a hit beforehand and use your invincibility frames to land a hit on him, which will cause him to lose a block every time he gets hit. It always makes you wonder if Rings were put here because they knew the boss's start was bullshit and they didn't have enough time to fix it before shipping it out. Apart from that horrible start though, the boss is pretty entertaining and decently challenging. After Sonic hits him 4 times, the base starts to self-destruct, and Sonic rescues Amy again, who just so happened to be in the zone there, and the two manage to jump off Little Planet. In the good ending, Little Planet restores life to Mobius before teleporting away, with a fireworks display of Sonic almost like it's thanking him for saving it, which is pretty heartwarming in that context, especially with the Japanese music. In the bad ending, Eggman has one of the time stones, but Sonic picks up a rock and chucks it hard enough to hit him, which is pretty nice to see. Afterwards, Sonic runs off while Amy cements her love for him. Overall, the game is a very nice one to play, as despite some flaws, it's still pretty fun. Most of the levels are pretty decent, the time travel is a nice concept and leads to some creative storytelling scenarios, the story is pretty well told, the soundtracks are great, the game is just a joy to look at. If you have the Sonic Gems collection, the Sega Genesis Mini 2, and or the Sonic Origins collection, there will be no harm in trying this game out. If you don't and are interested in trying out any of the other classic Sonic titles, or other Genesis/Sega CD titles for that matter, then this title might not be the game to change your mind on it, and thus might not be worth it. Apart from the removal of various minor content, the 2022 version is overall the best version to play with the easiest time traveling, and the most playable characters of any version, so I'd ultimately recommend that version above all else. So there you have it. Tune in next time when I review Sonic 2, everyone's favorite classic Sonic game, next to 3 and Knuckles. I'll get to that.